Well, some of your thoughts at home on the Lucy Letby case. One viewer says, what about the self-incriminating evidence of Letby's note she made saying she was guilty? Yes, I remember all of that, and that's all going to come out in the Criminal Cases Review Commission. And Dee says, I just find it hard to believe that the amount of babies that died were natural causes. Well, I can't comment on that. I'm not a statistician. Another viewer says the justice system needs work if it's that easily mistaken and careless. It's not fit for purpose and its judgments cannot be trusted. Well, look, David Davis has dedicated years of his career to these sort of campaigns. And if he tells me there have been 500 serious miscarriages of justice over the last few decades, I'm sure he is right. Now, Islamophobia. Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, is going to create a council on Islamophobia. It'll be 16 people strong. One of the shortlisted candidates is a guy called Qari Azim, a Leeds imam who was dismissed by the Tories in 2022 after backing calls for a ban on the film The Lady of Heaven about the Prophet Muhammad's daughter, which I would suggest is not a particularly encouraging start, Ranald, to an Islamophobia council. And the reason I say that, and you might think I'm being deeply sceptical, but the reason I'm saying that is 4 Gaza independents were elected in the election. You had Wes Streeting crept back in by 500 votes. You had Jess Phillips creep back in by 1,500 votes. And in those inner town, inner city communities, particularly the Pakistani ones, there are a lot of 14, 15, 16 and 17-year-olds who'll be voting at the next election. Yeah. Some of whom, 25% of them or so, have been quite radicalised in recent times. This is all politics, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's politics, and it's also, I think, an element of creating a two-tier Britain by default. I actually don't think that's necessarily their intention, but that's what's going to happen. We're creating blasphemy laws.
Or it gets seen like that.
Indeed. We're creating blasphemy laws, in effect, potentially, to protect one religion. I'm a practicing Christian. I am not calling for blasphemy laws to protect the Church of England or the Christian faith in its entirety.
Let alone the Archbishop of Canterbury.
I'm no longer in his office. But I think the point here is that there's a real perception that some people are going to be treated and protected differently from everyone else. And that's not the way we do things in Britain, and that would be deeply concerning. I also suspect it will lead a lot of people who voted Labour this time, perhaps lending their vote to Labour for the first time, think again and say, hang on, that's not what we voted for.
It's interesting, Joe, isn't it? I mean, the perception, and you can say it's real or otherwise, but the perception of two-tier Britain has established itself quite firmly.
Well, only because...
Over the course, just give you one example. So people that said or did horrid things in the wake of the Southport killings finished up in prison very, very quickly. And yet the Manchester airport attackers, it took months, 5 months, for any charges to be brought. And Ranald's point on this is if we single out one particular religion and say, you know, we must be careful what we say about them, almost, not quite blasphemy laws, but nearly, that could lead to a lot of discontent.
It could do if that is the aim of the Commission, which it isn't, and you know it isn't, Nigel. It is a commission to look at all sorts of things. You mentioned one person whose name is in the frame. The other one is Dominic Grieve, former Attorney General, who actually wrote the report in 2016, I think it was, which was adopted by the previous government and then adopted by Labour. It isn't just about Islamophobia, it's about a whole range of things.
But if we're being fair, I mean, surely we would establish not just this, but we'd establish an inquiry into anti-Semitism, which has clearly grown enormously in this country.
Well, I think that's one of the things suggested.
Or do we just do what Ranald said and say all religions are the same? There's no need to single anyone out in particular. Just
to go back to... I'm not even sure if you were in Parliament in 2016. Louise Casey, who seems to be the go-to person for reports, did a report for the government on community cohesion, and she came up with a whole load of recommendations, including people learning English within a year of being here, all sorts of things which would have supported and enabled a greater integration. And none of that was adopted by the Conservative government. So, actually, you know, you do have something to answer to.
Well, hang on. you don't have to accept everything that inquiry or
No, of
indeed
course you don't.
a report author might have put forward. But, I think you've got to take decisions based on the situation as you find them. And one thing I would say, in fairness to what the Labour Party is doing now, is bringing together Sajid Javid and John Denham, who I think are both very credible figures, to look at the aftermath of the riots and the sort of widespread unrest that there was. I think that is a much more helpful approach than trying to come up with these laws that create a de facto blasphemy law.
But I agree with you, and I think, that is a very good pairing. John Denham, who I used to work with at the Home Office.
And how long will it take? Because the argument against the national grooming gangs inquiry from the Prime Minister is it would take 7 years. I trust Southport's not going to take 7 years.
So I think they want to come back by the end of the year.
They've got to do these things more quickly.
So why couldn't they do grooming gangs more quickly?
Well, this isn't a public inquiry.
No.
This isn't a public inquiry. So this is the two of them and others.
Report.
And it hasn't
coming up with a
got,
report.
and does it have the right to make...
No,
it doesn't.
no.
So it's got no statutory powers.
No.
So is there any point in having commissions or inquiries if they haven't got statutory powers? Because in America, you love or hate the American system, but when they have a big committee hearing, they have real powers.
But there's a big difference there, because it's their House of Representatives, it's their Congress who run those inquiries.
Yeah, well, why don't we do that?
Well, I think there's merit.
That's all I'm saying.
There's merit in what you're saying, but the Inquiries Act that we currently have, which both parties, in fairness, have followed since 2005, says it's judge-led.
They're generally white.
Well, they're judge-led, and the lawyers are the ones that benefit. And I think there is merit, like the Parliamentary Commission on Banking Standards under the last Conservative government that got to the nub of the problem in the city. I think there is merit in having parliamentarians looking at the big issues of the day.
I think there's something to be said, even if it doesn't have the statutory weight, if you like, of a public inquiry, to do something quick while it's fresh in people's mind. I mean, the number of public inquiries that have been held and how much it has cost.
Yes.
And the time it's taken.
I mean, there's one opened only this month into the Omar bombing. I mean, that is a quarter of a century ago.
Let's go down the American route. Let's make our politicians earn their living.
We've got select committees, Nigel, which are very powerful, but they don't.
But they're not really powerful, are they? Because they're only powerful. But they're only powerful, Joe, if people agree to go.
No, that's not true. So, select committees have the ability to summon people to Parliament, other than other members of Parliament. That's one caveat.
And if they refuse?
There is sanction, but it hasn't been used.
It's never been used.
It hasn't been used for, our lifetimes. But there is a sanction, and we should restore that. I agree with that entirely.
There we are. We'll end that segment with some degree of agreement.
At GB News, we believe in the power of free speech. We're not afraid to ask the tough questions, challenge the status quo, and give you a voice. While others silence dissent, we champion the truth. So by becoming a GB News member, you're not just supporting free speech, you're defending it. Please do consider supporting us today. Together, we'll hold the powerful to account and make sure your voice is always heard. Simply go to gbnews.com/support and stand with us for what matters most.